When the lawyer handed over the deed to a barren, rock-filled wasteland, her siblings laughed. They got the mansions. She got a sinkhole. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that this worthless dirt held a secret so massive it would rewrite their family history forever. The mahogany-panelled conference room at Caldwell Hughes and Partners smelled of old money lemon polish and barely concealed greed. Josephine Josie Mercer sat at the far end of the sprawling table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Outside, a bleak November rain lashed against the high-rise windows of downtown Seattle, matching the heavy, suffocating mood in the room. To her left sat her older brother, John. He was impeccably dressed in a bespoke Italian suit, idly checking his Rolex every 3 minutes. To her right was her sister Stephanie, who had spent the last hour aggressively filing her nails, sighing loudly whenever the senior partner Theodore Caldwell cleared his throat. They were here for the reading of the last will and testament of Harrison Mercer. Harrison had been a titan of industry. In the late 1980s, he had famously outmaneuvered several major private equity firms to secure a near monopoly on regional freight logistics, amassing a fortune that the Wall Street Journal conservatively estimated at over $300 million. But to Josie, he hadn't been a ruthless CEO. He had been the man who taught her how to fish in the Puget Sound, the man who let her ride on his shoulders through the apple orchards, and in his final grueling years battling pulmonary fibrosis, the man she had entirely rearranged her life to care for. While John was expanding his own venture capital firm in New York, and Stephanie was wintering in Gstaad, Josie had moved back into the gloomy Mercer estate. She was the one who managed his oxygen tanks, organized his medications, and held his frail, trembling hand when the coughing fits racked his frail body at 3 a.m. She didn't do it for the inheritance. She did it because she loved him. But as Theodore Caldwell adjusted his reading glasses, the reality of the Mercer family dynamic was about to be laid bare in black and white. "We will now proceed with the distribution of the primary assets," Theodore announced, his voice raspy and strictly professional. He shuffled the heavy watermarked parchment papers. "To my eldest grandson, John Harrison Mercer, I leave the entirety of my voting shares in Mercer Logistics, as well as the Denver commercial real estate portfolio to be held in fee simple absolute." John leaned back, a smug, satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Expected," he murmured. "To my granddaughter, Stephanie Rose Mercer." Theodore continued, "I leave the coastal properties located in Malibu and Carmel by the Sea, alongside the liquid assets currently held in the Cayman Offshore Trust." Stephanie stopped filing her nails. "Wait, both the Malibu and Carmel houses. Oh, thank God. I was worried he'd force me to share the Carmel estate." She didn't even look at Josie. Josie's heart hammered against her ribs. It wasn't about the money. She lived a comfortable, modest life as a freelance historical archivist. But the blatant division of the grandest, most valuable pieces of their grandfather's legacy to the siblings who hadn't visited him in 3 years felt like a physical blow. Still, there was a lot of the estate left. The family home, the various investment portfolios, the timberlands. "And finally," Theodore said, pausing slightly. He looked up, shooting a brief, unreadable glance at Josie. "To my youngest granddaughter, Josephine Lily Mercer." Josie held her breath. "Just give me the cabin, Grandpa. Just the little cabin on the lake where we used to fish. I leave the deed, subsurface rights, and all associated liabilities of Tract 42, locally known as the Devil's Basin, located in Oak Haven County, Montana." Silence blanketed the room. Then John burst out laughing. "Tract 42, John choked out, wiping a tear from his eye. "Are you serious, Ted?" He gave her the sinkhole. "I am merely reading the document, John," Theodore said sharply. Stephanie giggled, covering her mouth. "Oh, Joe, I am so sorry. Didn't the EPA survey that land a few years ago and declare it an unbuildable hazard? It's just 60 acres of jagged rocks and dead brush. Josie felt the blood drain from her face. She knew exactly what Tract 42 was. It was a notoriously treacherous parcel of land Harrison had acquired in a bad debt settlement in the 1970s. The local county records had it assessed at a few $1,000s, primarily because it was a geological nightmare riddled with unstable limestone caves and deep fissures. The property taxes were notoriously higher than any potential agricultural or commercial yield. It was quite literally the worst parcel of land in the entire Mercer portfolio. Why, the question screamed in Josie's mind. Why would you do this to me, Grandpa? Was I just the hired help to you in the end? Is there anything else? Theodore, Josie asked, her voice betraying a slight tremor. A trust the lake house. Theodore looked down at the documents with a genuine look of pity. I'm sorry, Josephine. The lake house was liquidated to cover the estate taxes on John and Stephanie's inheritances per your grandfather's instructions. Tract 42 is your sole inheritance. John stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Well, look on the bright side, Josie. You always did love hiking and getting your hands dirty. Now you have 60 acres of premium dirt to play in. Let me know if you need a loan for the property taxes. As her siblings exited the room, already making dinner reservations at a Michelin-starred restaurant to celebrate, Josie sat frozen. The sting of rejection was a heavy, suffocating weight on her chest. Josephine, Theodore said softly, breaking the silence once the heavy oak door clicked shut. She looked up, her vision blurred with unshed tears. Theodore reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a sealed yellowed envelope. The wax seal on the back bore the familiar M crest of her grandfather's signet ring. Your grandfather gave me very strict instructions. I was to read the will exactly as written, allow your siblings to leave, and then hand this to you. Theodore slid the envelope across the polished mahogany. He made me swear on my career that neither John nor Stephanie would ever know this letter exists. Josie picked up the envelope. Her name was written on the front in Harrison's shaky, late-stage handwriting. She broke the wax seal. Inside was a single piece of heavy cardstock. My dearest Joe, if you are reading this, John is likely gloating, and Stephanie is already spending money she hasn't yet touched. Forgive an old man for his theatricality, but I needed them blinded by their own greed. The world values what it can easily see. They saw mansions and stock options. They saw the surface. But you, my sweet girl, have always possessed the rare gift of looking deeper. Go to the Devil's Basin. Walk 300 paces due north from the old iron survey marker. The roots run deepest where the soil is unforgiving. Do not sell the land, Joe. Claim what is yours. Love, Grandpa. Josie stared at the letter, her pulse suddenly racing. Harrison Mercer did not do things by accident. He was a master tactician, a man who built an empire on secrets and strategy. Tract 42 wasn't an insult. It was a map. 3 days later, Josie's rented Jeep Wrangler rumbled down a deeply rutted, unpaved logging road in Oak Haven County, Montana. The landscape was as brutal as her siblings had described. The lush, towering pines of the Pacific Northwest had given way to an arid, unforgiving expanse of scrub brush, cracked limestone, and twisted juniper trees. She pulled up to a rusty chain-link fence that sagged between 2 rotting wooden posts. A faded, bullet-riddled sign hung from the wire private property. Mercer Estate. Danger unstable ground. Waiting for her by a beat-up pickup truck was Walter Higgins, a local land surveyor she had hired to help her find the property boundaries. Walter was a leathery, sun-baked man in his 60s who looked at Josie with a mixture of skepticism and pity. You the Mercer girl. Walter asked, spitting a sunflower seed into the dust as she stepped out of the jeep. I am. Josephine, she said, extending a hand. Walter shook it briefly. Gotta be honest with you, Miss Mercer. When you called asking for a boundary survey on the Devil's Basin, I thought it was a prank. Your granddaddy hadn't sent anyone out here in 30 years, not since the state geological guys almost lost a truck in one of the sinkholes. I know its reputation, Josie said, pulling on a pair of heavy hiking boots and slinging a canvas backpack over her shoulders. But it's mine now. I need to see it. Walter grunted. Not much to see. Just rock rattlesnakes and holes deep enough to swallow a house. The old-timers say, back in the 1920s, bootleggers used to try and navigate the underground caverns here to hide liquor, but half of them never came out. The limestone is like Swiss cheese. It's a liability, Miss Mercer. If I were you, I'd donate it to the state as a conservation tract and take the tax write-off. Maybe I will, Josie lied smoothly. But first I need to find the old iron survey marker on the southern boundary. Walter raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He pulled a topographical map and a GPS device from his truck. Follow me. Step exactly where I step. I ain't hauling you out of a ravine today. The hike was grueling. The November air was bitterly cold, yet the sheer physical exertion of climbing over jagged limestone outcroppings left Josie sweating under her thick flannel jacket. Every few steps the ground sounded hollow, a terrifying booming echo that resonated beneath the soles of her boots, a constant reminder of the fragile crust of earth separating them from dark subterranean drops. After 40 minutes of navigating the treacherous terrain, Walter stopped and pointed with his walking stick. There she is. Protruding from a slab of white rock was a thick, rusted iron spike stamped with the letters USGS, 1968. Thanks, Walter, Josie said, checking her compass. I need to take a look around on my own for a bit. I'll meet you back at the trucks in an hour. Walter looked uneasy. You sure about that? A-storms blowing over the ridge. Skies getting that ugly bruised color. Josie looked up. Dark, violent clouds were indeed rolling rapidly over the jagged peaks of the distant mountains, carrying the distinct smell of ozone and rain. I'll be quick, I promise. Reluctantly, Walter nodded and began his descent back toward the road. Once he was out of sight, Josie pulled her grandfather's letter from her pocket, verifying the instructions. Walk 300 paces due north from the old iron survey marker. She aligned her compass. North pointed directly toward a steep, intimidating ridge of broken rock that looked like a shattered spine. Taking a deep breath, she began to count. 1, 2, 3. The wind began to howl violently, whipping her hair across her face. The temperature plummeted. 150, 151. The first drops of rain fell heavy, icy, and sharp as glass. Within seconds, the sky opened up into a torrential downpour, turning the dry, dusty limestone into a slick, treacherous ice rink. 280. Josie was shivering violently now, her boots slipping on the wet rocks. Visibility dropped to less than 20 feet. She needed to find cover, but she was so close. 298. 299. 300. She stopped. She was standing in the middle of a shallow, bowl-shaped depression surrounded by high boulders. There was nothing here. No chest, no hidden cabin, no X marking the spot. Just dead wet dirt and sharp rocks. "Grandpa," she whispered at the rain washing away the tears of frustration welling in her eyes. "What did you want me to see?" Suddenly, a deafening crack of thunder shook the very ground beneath her. Or rather, the ground didn't just shake, it gave way. With a sickening crack, the limestone slab Josie was standing on fractured. She didn't even have time to scream. The earth opened up beneath her boots, and she was plunged into absolute darkness, sliding down a steep, muddy chute of loose gravel and rock. She tumbled violently, her arms flailing, scraping against sharp stone, as she slid deeper and deeper into the earth. It felt like an eternity, a terrifying descent into the throat of the mountain, until she hit a flat surface with a jarring thud that knocked the wind out of her lungs. Josie lay gasping in the pitch black, her chest heaving, the sound of the rain far above, reduced to a muffled, distant drone. The air down here was different. It didn't smell like damp earth and dead leaves. It smelled dry. It smelled like oil and old metal. Trembling, she patted her pockets, a wave of immense relief washing over her when she felt the hard plastic of her smartphone. Miraculously, the screen wasn't shattered. She turned on the flashlight app. The harsh white beam cut through the absolute darkness, illuminating the space around her. She expected to see the rough natural walls of a limestone cave. She expected stalactites and dirt. Instead, her breath hitched in her throat. The beam of light reflected off perfectly smooth, reinforced concrete walls. Thick industrial wooden beams braced the ceiling, and running along the upper corner of the wall was a thick bundle of insulated electrical cables. Josie scrambled to her feet, ignoring the painful throbbing in her knee. She slowly swept the light across the cavern. This wasn't a natural sinkhole. It was a man-made subterranean bunker. She followed the tunnel. It sloped gently downward, the floor leveled and packed down. The space widened, opening into a massive underground chamber. And there, at the far end of the chamber, built directly into the solid rock face, was a door. It wasn't a wooden mine door. It was a massive circular steel vault door, the kind you would find in a high-security federal bank, adorned with heavy steel locking bolts and a polished brass wheel. Embossed on the steel was the faded logo of the Mosler Safe Company. Josie walked toward it, as if in a trance, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Why was there a bank vault buried 50 feet beneath a worthless stretch of Montana scrubland? She reached out her fingers, trembling, as they brushed the cold steel of the vault. That was when she saw it. Right beside the antique brass wheel, completely contrasting with the decades-old steel of the door, was a sleek, modern digital keypad, and a small red LED light on the keypad was steadily, quietly blinking. There was power down here. The vault wasn't a forgotten relic of the past. It was active, and whatever Harrison Mercer had locked inside was waiting specifically for her. Josie stared at the blinking red light on the vault's keypad, her mind racing through a chaotic catalogue of dates, numbers, and memories. A 6-digit code stood between her and whatever her grandfather had buried beneath the desolate Montana earth. Above her, the freezing rain poured through the fractured limestone ceiling, pooling in the mud at her feet. She had to think. Harrison Mercer didn't trust digital security. He trusted history. He trusted the tangible. She remembered the heavy gold pocket watch he always kept on his desk, a rare antique famously gifted to him by the reclusive aviation tycoon Howard Hughes, after Harrison secured a vital supply chain contract in the 1960s. Harrison used to let her hold it when she was a little girl. The secret to Power Joe, he had told her, coughing through his oxygen mask during his final weeks, is knowing the exact time to strike. The serial number engraved on the back of the Hughes watch. She had memorized it as a child. Trembling, her mud-caked fingers reached for the keypad. She punched in the numbers, 471968. The small LED light turned from crimson to a brilliant emerald green. Deep within the steel door, a series of heavy mechanical tumblers slammed into place with a sound like a thunderclap. The massive brass wheel groaned, turning on its own before the heavy Mosler vault door swung outward, on perfectly oiled hinges, releasing a rush of dry, climate-controlled air. Josie stepped over the threshold, her jaw dropping. It was not a dusty cavern. It was a state-of-the-art subterranean command center. Rows of sleek, humming servers lined the reinforced concrete walls, their blue indicator lights casting an ethereal glow over the room. In the center sat a massive, antique mahogany desk, an exact replica of the one in Theodore Caldwell's Seattle law firm. On the desk lay a single, leather-bound ledger, an assortment of legal files, and a heavy fireproof lockbox. She approached the desk, her heart hammering against her ribs. She opened the ledger. The first page was a handwritten note in her grandfather's unmistakable scrawl. "My dearest Joe, if you are standing here, it means you possessed the grit to look past the ugly surface. Welcome to the true Mercer Empire." Josie pulled up the leather executive chair and began to read. For 2 hours she sat in the humming silence of the vault, the magnitude of her grandfather's genius slowly washing over her. Harrison hadn't been a fool in his final years. He had been the ultimate architect. The documents proved that Tract 42, the Devil's Basin, was far from a worthless sinkhole. Tucked beneath the dense legal jargon was a highly classified geological survey commissioned in secret by Rio Tinto, one of the world's largest private mining corporations. The survey confirmed that the treacherous limestone network was actually the capstone for the most concentrated high-grade deposit of neodymium and scandium in North America. These rare earth elements were the absolute lifeblood of modern technology, essential for everything from electric vehicle batteries to advanced aerospace defense systems. The land she had inherited wasn't worth a few $1,000s. It was sitting on a conservative estimate of $4 billion in unmined minerals. But the true twist, the poetic justice that made Josie gasp in the silent room, was found in the legal files. Harrison had anticipated his other grandchildren's greed. He knew his eldest grandson would demand the logistics company, and Stephanie would demand the real estate and offshore cash. He gave them exactly what they wanted, but with a fatal invisible catch. 20 years ago, Harrison had quietly transferred the absolute ownership of the land beneath every single warehouse distribution center and coastal mansion into an anonymous holding company called Basin Trust. The operating companies that her siblings now controlled merely leased the land, and according to the bearer shares locked inside the fireproof box in front of her, Josephine Mercer was the sole, uncontested owner of Basin Trust. Her older brother didn't own an empire. He was just Josie's tenant, and the moment he missed a lease payment, she had the legal right to seize every truck warehouse and asset he thought he commanded. She leaned back in the chair, the shadows of the vault dancing across her face. The quiet, dutiful caretaker who had wiped her grandfather's brow and suffered the endless mockery of her siblings was gone. In her place sat the most powerful landowner in the Pacific Northwest. It was time to go back to Seattle. 3 weeks later, the atmosphere inside the boardroom of Caldwell Hughes and Partners was utterly toxic. Her older brother paced furiously in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, screaming into his smartphone. "What do you mean the title is encumbered? I am the CEO. I inherited the commercial real estate, free and clear. Blackstone Group is waiting to close this buyout in 48 hours. And if you tell me we don't own the ground under the Denver hub, I will sue your firm into oblivion." He ended the call, hurling his phone onto the mahogany table. Stephanie sat in the corner, her usual arrogant demeanor replaced by wide-eyed panic. "My offshore accounts are frozen too. The bank manager said the primary dividend feed was legally redirected yesterday morning." "What is happening?" Theodore Caldwell sat calmly at the head of the table, sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea. "I believe the new majority stakeholder has arrived to explain it to you." The heavy oak doors swung open, Josie walked in. She wasn't wearing her usual oversized wool sweaters or practical hiking jeans. She wore a sharply tailored midnight blue Armani suit, her hair pulled back into a sleek, commanding style. Flanking her were two ruthless-looking corporate attorneys, each carrying thick leather briefcases. Her brother stopped pacing, staring at her in utter disbelief. "Josie, what are you doing here? Did you fall into one of your sinkholes and hit your head?" "Take a seat," Josie said. Her voice didn't shake. It was cold, precise, and vibrated with unquestionable authority. "Excuse me," he sneered, stepping toward her. "This is a closed board meeting for the equity partners. You own a pile of toxic rocks in Montana. Get out." "I said take a seat," Josie repeated, not breaking eye contact. She nodded to her lead attorney, who unclasped his briefcase and slid two massive stacks of legal documents across the table, one toward her brother, one toward Stephanie. "What is this?" Stephanie whispered, staring at the embossed seal of Basin Trust. "That is your reality check," Josie said, taking the seat opposite of Theodore Caldwell. "For the last 3 years, while you two were busy networking in the Hamptons and skiing in the Alps, I was keeping our grandfather alive. You thought he was senile. You thought he was weak. But Harrison Mercer spent his final years laying a trap for the greedy." She leaned forward, tapping a manicured fingernail against the mahogany table. "You don't own Mercer Logistics. You own the trucks. I own the asphalt they park on. I own the land beneath the Denver hub, the Seattle port, and the coastal mansions in Malibu. It's all controlled by Basin Trust, which is legally anchored to the subsurface rights of Tract 42. The color drained completely from her brother's face. He flipped frantically through the pages, his eyes scanning the irrefutable signatures and lease agreements. This is fraud. You forged this." "It is ironclad," Theodore Caldwell interjected, smoothly setting his teacup down. "I drafted the trust myself 22 years ago. Josephine is your sole landlord and the primary creditor of your offshore accounts." "You're trying to sell the company to Blackstone," Josie said, her gaze fixed on her brother. "Liquidating the empire Grandpa built so you can cash out and play venture capitalist. I am vetoing the sale." "You can't do that," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "I already did," Josie replied coolly. "I raised the commercial leases on all Mercer Logistics properties and by 300% effective at midnight. The company is now operating at a massive deficit. Blackstone pulled their offer an hour ago. Your stock options are essentially worthless." Stephanie began to cry, burying her face in her hands. "Joe, please. We're family. You can't leave us with nothing. I don't know how to live without that money." Josie looked at the sister who hadn't bothered to attend their grandfather's funeral because she had a scheduling conflict with a wellness retreat. She felt a brief flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of Harrison's labored breathing in his final days. "I'm not leaving you with nothing," Josie said softly. "Grandpa taught me that roots run deepest where the soil is unforgiving. So I am giving you the opportunity to grow." She slid 2 fresh contracts across the table. "These are employment contracts. Your brother will remain CEO, but your salary is strictly capped. Your bonuses are eliminated, and you will report directly to my holding company. You will actually have to work to keep this logistics network alive. If you increase our market share by 10% over the next 5 years, I will begin vesting equity back into your name." She turned to her sobbing sister. "Stephanie, your Malibu house is being converted into a corporate retreat. You are being relocated to the Denver office to oversee regional accounts. You start Monday at 8 in the morning." "I don't know anything about regional accounts," Stephanie wailed. "Then you better learn fast," Josie said, standing up and buttoning her suit jacket. "Because if either of you refuses, I will call in the debts for close on every single asset, and you will both be completely bankrupt by Friday." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had been completely obliterated. The untouchable heirs had been reduced to middle management, working entirely at the mercy of the sister they had treated like a servant. Josie turned toward the door, pausing just before she exited. She looked back at her stunned, defeated siblings. "Enjoy your inheritance," she said softly. As she walked out into the cool Seattle afternoon, the rain had stopped. The clouds had parted, and for the first time in weeks, the sun was shining down bright and golden on the true heir of the Mercer Empire. If you loved this story of ultimate revenge and family drama, make sure to hit that like button. Do you think Josie was too harsh on her siblings? Or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more incredible twists-filled storytelling every single week. Turn on notifications so you never miss a tale.